Hypixel SkyBlock is over 6 years old, so of course it's had a ton of updates. But what if I told you there are over 25 updates that we've been told about and even promised would drop that we have yet to see even an alpha for? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about in today's video. So let's jump straight into it. I'm going to go through these promised updates in the order that they interest me or the order that I would like to see them drop, but number one's probably not coming anytime soon, and I'm of course talking about other dungeons. Before the catacombs even came out, they were referring to it as the very first dungeon and said that of course it would take a lot longer to create than the next ones. After the update did drop, they announced that future dungeons would probably not beat corridors and rooms. Think of forest trails, plains, desert ruins, could be anything. But more importantly, they said that it should take much less time to make. But it's been over 5 years now and no news of new dungeons. And when this first update dropped, it was only the first 3 floors of dungeons. But when they finally dropped the last floor, floor 7, they announced that it took a lot longer for them to make these floors than they originally anticipated. But they would not be releasing any more floors for the catacombs other than Master Mode. So the next time we receive a new floor, it should be from a brand new dungeon. Update 2 is one that's been talked about quite a bit as of late, and that's because it hopefully won't stay unreleased for too long. I'm of course talking about the Dungeon Breaker. This update has been on alpha 3 or 4 times as of me recording this, and it seems like it's pretty much ready. A lot of players, including myself, were hoping it would drop this week, but hopefully it's dropping the week that you guys are seeing this video. For those of you that haven't heard of this update, stonking is a sort of exploit that has been allowed in the game for dungeons that basically lets you mine through walls in certain scenarios to get to places that you would normally take a lot longer to get to. Now, since it's been allowed for 5+ years without anything happening to it, they're finally making it an actual part of the game, which will allow you to not only break the blocks that you can already break on 1.8.9, but also allow you to do this on newer versions like 1.21. And you'll be able to do this by just actually mining through a wall instead of having to do some crazy stuff in your inventory to make it a ghost pickaxe. So it should make dungeons much easier to get into for newer players and make it easier for the veterans to find more parties. Another dungeons related update we never received was the Better Mayor for Paul and Aatrox. Way back in June of 2024, we received an alpha for the Better Mayors update, and while this revamped the perks of a ton of mayors, unfortunately Aatrox and Paul were excluded from these 4th perks. They did give us a little tease that Aatrox and Paul may be receiving some eventful updates, but this was the last time this update was mentioned, and seeing as it's been over a year without any word, it may just be dead in the water or pushed to years in the future. Although that update was teased over a year ago, we could be getting a new mayor related update in the next couple of months. When the Foraging update dropped in June of this year, there were a bunch of future updates that were teased, including the Mythological Ritual V2, where they announced that Diana's Mythological Ritual event will be getting a modernized look, adding some new mobs, drops, and of course, the mythic griffin pet. It's been 3 months since then, so hopefully it's still in the works. But of course, we can't talk about the Foraging update without talking about the 2 remaining islands of Galatia. In the same patch notes where the Mythological Ritual update was teased, they teased a follow-up patch and future islands for Galatia. We've already seen, hopefully, most of the follow-up patches for this, but the 2nd and 3rd islands are nowhere to be found. This is probably because it was only 3 months ago that this post was made, and the production was still on hold at that time. I'm sure they've started diving into it by now, but I still wouldn't expect to see this update before the end of the year. Back before the Foraging update dropped though, the SkyBlock community was in a little bit of a content drought. So to help hype us up for future updates, the admins made a ton of design threads announcing newer updates that were again only in the design phase, but we could still see some of them in the future. The first of which was a revamp to private islands. They said almost every SkyBlock update adds content outside of the private islands, but they believe private islands have so much more potential. Coming back to your island should be an exciting moment. Maybe something spawned on it while you were away. Plus, some new options in theory crafting around minions could be added, and maybe some rare events. Some of these ideas in this thread were implemented in other ways. For example, once you reach level 15, a rare NPC might sometimes pay a visit to your island. This has come to fruition in the form of Sam, the garden NPC. She doesn't show up at level 15, she shows up at level 5, but it is the same idea. Some other ideas were that at level 20, special dragons could very rarely fly across the sky in your island, and you get rewards for shooting them down, or maybe a special type of minion that doesn't generate resources but does something else instead. In a separate thread, they talked about some revamps for minions, which they've since acted on a little bit, mainly speaking about fuels and diamond spreading sort of things, which they did recently nerf the corrupt soil. So that's one of the fuel / diamond spreading type of items that got nerfed. But the interesting things that they may add in the future were minion personalities, where each minion would have a chance at a different one that could provide small strategic decisions in the quest of maximizing their usefulness. Also a type of special minion that unlocks based on your skyblock level that wouldn't generate resources but instead facilitate gameplay, so maybe give different types of stats, or maybe make a certain item's cooldown shorter. Imagine a minion that removes your cooldown on your right click ability from your Heart of the Mountain tree, or one that removes the cooldown on your right click ability from your Heart of the Forest tree. Remove might be a little strong, maybe just reduce, but you see the point. It could be very, very helpful. Another big change that could be added is the mastery system. In another one of the design threads for combat, they announced that they plan to add 3 different types of mastery, similar to a Heart of the Mountain, but for 3 types of combat. You would be able to swap between them and complete them all, but you could only have one active at a time. One would represent melee combat, another archery, and one mage. And as you progress through the masteries, you'll be able to unlock sub-masteries that unlock different skill trees. For example, archery could lead to the ninja, marksman, and ranger skills. So depending on what you're planning to do, you may have a completely different tree. This could make things a little overly complicated, I think. However, the implications could be very, very cool. And if it's implemented correctly, then hopefully it won't be confusing. Another update that was announced that late game players especially are excited for is, of course, the Chocolate Factory RNG meter. This update was announced all the way back in December of last year, where it was announced that Chocolate Factory V4 would include an RNG meter, a new rabbit faction tower, and a unique tower that would let you get unique rabbits that would remain in your possession as long as you pay enough coins to keep them. The tower would just be a coin sink for those who want to progress faster on the rankings, but for everybody else, it'd just be a boost of chocolate. So for most people, those other things don't matter too much. The main thing is the Chocolate Factory RNG meter. Late game players especially end up claiming all of their rabbit hitman rabbits as often as they can if they're not going out and manually grabbing the rabbits themselves. All because they give 10 Skyblock XP for each unique divine rabbit. And seeing as they're a 1 in 2,500 chance, this update is really, really helpful for those of us who are going for max Skyblock XP. Another great update for late game players would be the reduction to starring your infernal sets from Kuudra. This update was actually announced with the Foraging Alpha, but since there were so many changes going on with Crimson and Kuudra gear in general already, they decided to wait and put this off to a later update, which would also include croesus for Kuudra. The croesus system for dungeons has been super well received, allowing you to open your dungeon chests even after you've completed runs from 2 days ago. Having the same system added to Kuudra would be super helpful, since you wouldn't have to make sure you have Kuudra keys inside your inventory at the end of each run. Another nice combat update that we should receive hopefully soon is the introduction to the Guardian Slayer. When the mob types update was added, the Guardian Slayer was announced. It will take place on its own dedicated instanced island, which will be accessible via the ship navigator, which is how you get to the bayou. There, you'll be able to fish up the island's exclusive sea creatures and kill them to make the boss spawn. Since the boss will only be able to be spawned on that island, they'll be implementing some map mechanics into the boss's fight. However, this update will have to release after another update, the Lotus Atoll. The Lotus Atoll is another one of the updates that was announced with the Foraging release, and we didn't get very much information on it. Only 2 sentences. It is the next fishing island that will be accessed via the ship navigator, and it will contain some trophy frogs. Personally, I'm not eager to go through the trophy fishing experience again, but hopefully this is an early game version of it and it won't be nearly as difficult. Another sea creature related update that was announced with confidence was in another one of the design threads for Skyblock 1.0, announcing that sea creatures will drop rare alchemy ingredient. Alchemy is one of the lesser known / worst skills in Skyblock, so a revamp would be very nice, but we're more likely to see that revamp sooner than later in the Year of the Witch update. The Year of the Witch was announced once again in the Foraging update patch note. It will be centered around alchemy, and you'll have to hunt particular mobs, killing them to gather ingredients. You can then use those ingredients to gain permanent buffs or as a currency in the Year of the Witch shop. Also, a seal pet will be added with the update. More likely it will be added to the Year of the Seal event, rather than the Year of the Witch event. However, the next update we're a lot less likely to see very soon, the Primal Dragons update. This update was released to alpha 2 separate times, but as you can see, both times it was pretty laggy. There's a chance it'll get to return since we're updating to 1.21. Hopefully performance issues won't be as much of a problem on the newer version, but once the Better Mayors update dropped on the main server, they announced that they didn't plan to release this update anytime soon. However, it was not fully canceled. Another update that has been teased for a very long time now is the Great Glacite Lake update. This post is from the 2024 recap, so December of 2024, where they announced the second part of Glacite Tunnels, the Great Glacite Lake, which was originally planned to be more of a mining update, but after some redesigning, looks like it's going to be more of a fishing update. It will, however, still have some mining aspects to it, seeing as you will be able to obtain the next super rare piece of equipment for mining from it, another part of the Devon set, of which we only currently have the pendant. And it was announced the update would include mythic rarity sea creatures, similar to Wiki Tiki, Jawbus, or the Ragnarok. But with all these later game updates being planned, there are also some early game updates, one of which was announced with the gardening update back in February of 2023. The addition of SkyBlock chapters was actually on alpha at one point. However, it seemed to just be a system added on to the level system, very different from Hina's chapters, which was added to the foraging update shortly after its release. There is an entire menu for this now with /chapters, where it says you can view your progression through the chapters of each island, implying that there will be chapters of future islands, and hopefully chapter additions made to islands that have been out for years now. This should make it much easier for players to get into SkyBlock and actually understand what's going on, compared to how it is now with the current quests in the game. But alongside the addition of chapters, we could also receive a revamp to quests as well as more quests added into the game. In another one of the design threads, they announced SkyBlock levels could also unlock multiple parts of the global quest line, as well as side quests. So there may be a timeline in the future where we get some less obscure SkyBlock lore. But there's one thing that has been obscure since the release of the game, the door to the south. This door is on the very back of the hub island. If you teleport all the way back there, you will see that this very odd, very large, very ominous door is still here, and it has been since the game released back in 2019. The only hint we got from the admins was with the release patch notes. The very last hint was you might find a large portal south of the hub. Maybe guilds will have some things to do there. But in those same patch notes, they said that you would be able to rent the houses in the village, and that idea has since been pretty much completely removed. Back at release, you could walk through the houses in the hub here, and there would be NPCs of the admins or other famous players inside each of the houses, hinting that a guild would be able to buy them. But those NPCs have since been removed, replaced by Bobby Joe, or completely refurbished and replaced with brand new NPCs. So seeing as that idea was scrapped, this one probably was too. However, the door has not been removed, so hopefully it will have some sort of use in the future. Perhaps even with the release of 1.0 for SkyBlock. SkyBlock can still only be found in the prototype lobby because it hasn't fully been released yet. As you can see, the version, at least as of me recording this, is 0.23.4. So when the game fully releases, it will be 1.0. And that release could include a lot of the changes I've mentioned so far, including the masteries and the private island / minion revamp. But the biggest change would be requiring all players to be on the latest version to play everything on SkyBlock. Right now, you can play pretty much any island on 1.8.9 and you'll be fine. However, with the addition of Galatia, you can now only go to the park and to the Galatia island if you're on 1.21.5 or newer. Eventually, this will likely be the case for every single SkyBlock island, and that is the big idea behind the release of 1.0. They are slowly updating the islands to 1.21.5 so that mod makers have time to adjust their mods to newer versions, and resource pack designers have the option to redesign their resource packs to newer versions as well. However, the resource pack design is one of the things that Hypixel is less worried about because they're designing their own resource pack. These are some first drafts of what the main menus and crafting menus could look like, as well as how swords could look with their own unique 3D models, as well as a change to how NPC dialogue is shown on the screen, and maybe even cutscenes in the future. And finally, one of the biggest updates that Ironman players in particular have been waiting for, Ironman Ws. While there is a bunch that we don't know about this update, a few things that have been shared is an Ironman exclusive auction house, as well as a cosmetics auction house where Ironman players will only be able to buy. That way they can still get access to dyes or skins, without having to spend gems. That update was announced in December of last year, however, as planned for this year. They've still got 3 months to implement it, so hopefully we will see it before the end of the year. But that is all of the major updates that I can really fully talk about. I know that there has been a Magic Find and Pet Luck revamp announced, as well as possibly some Crimson Isle boss revamps. However, I couldn't find the patch notes where they were mentioned, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Have an amazing rest of your day, and God bless.